All right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the seventh dialogue in our land-based mitigation dialogue series. Just to give a little context as to the work that we've been carrying out, and the idea behind this series is that we've been working to understand and identify the best land-based interventions that are being implemented in India for climate action with the focus on mitigation and trying to see which of these provide the best co-benefits for communities, for the environment, and what might be the challenges or barriers in their scale up. The idea behind this is to develop a roadmap which can give us an indication of how we scale up these sort of interventions across the country to make sure that they are context specific, they are beneficial to the region, and can provide the maximum co-benefits when it comes to the communities and the environment, rather than just focusing on mitigation, especially given India's context of large number of communities which rely on land, our dependence on it both from a food security and a livelihood perspective. So we need to make sure that our focus is not just on mitigation when it comes to land, and we also look at other areas. As part of this, we've looked at in projects and interventions that are going on across the country. We have analyzed number of projects. We've done a lot of consultations to see what works, what doesn't work, and we're also doing a deep dive. The idea behind the deep dive was to identify a vulnerable region. In this case, we've selected UP, in which we've done field work across different locations to see what is going on, what is working for people, whether it's a government aided project, whether it's private funded project, to be able to do a very specific agroecological based roadmap, which can help us to scale up these sort of interventions. As part of this, very important part, very important component of it is also to hear from people who work in this sector, from different perspectives, whether it's forestry, whether it's agriculture, land use of different kinds, whether it's government, academics, NGOs who are implementing things on the ground. And this is where the dialogue series comes in. We've had 6 of these already. We are on the 7th one today. Just to briefly talk about it, I'm going to share my screen of what these have been till now. The first one was a very broad looking thing. We wanted to start just to know how land-based mitigations are being done and how they can support climate action in India. The things that came out of it was that when it comes to the forestry sector, quality planting material is very important, whether we look in forestry or agroforestry, that can quite often be a stumbling block. We need to engage subnational entities as well if we want to scale up such actions. And it's very important to shift towards agricultural landscapes to input sustainable systems. Next, we wanted to see what role multi-stakeholder partnerships can play in large-scale projects. Often people work in silos where we might only be looking at one particular sector, and we wanted to see that how can diverse stakeholders work together in order to implement such projects. And this was a very interesting dialogue as well, where the main thing that came out was that all partners need to be flexible, and we need to be able to adapt when we are on the ground. We need to be constantly talking to each other, and of course include communities as part of this multi-stakeholder group. Then we focused on grasslands, and here it came out that often these days there are projects which are going on which, because people might not understand the value of grasslands, when you look at a mitigation focused idea, you might think of converting it into a plantation. And it's very, very important that we are able to redefine grasslands and understand their importance when it comes to climate action. Next, we look at particularly community engagement and how this needs to be scaled up, how we all need to understand the value of this. And in this, there was a lot of conversation about how smallholders are facing challenges when it comes to natural farming, and we need to be able to support that transition before they see the true benefits and the true value of natural farming from their land. It's very, very important that we continue to engage with them to understand their traditional practices and benefits of traditional knowledge combined with scientific information should be a high priority. It's also important that we empower local institutions such as panchayats if we want to scale up any kind of climate action on the ground. The fifth dialogue was specifically focused on the forestry sector and forest-based initiatives in land-based mitigation. Here, of course, the projects and programs such as CAMPA are very, very important because they're a huge source of resources in the ground. And how can we make sure that these interventions are truly beneficial and are reaching the communities and showing us the true benefit of ecosystems was discussed. A couple of projects that are doing very well in India, like the Haritharam in Telangana and the Clean India Mission, have been quite successful, and they can be seen as models of how collaborations also work with communities and forest departments. The last of the dialogue series that we held was specifically focused on UP, given the regional context that is of our projects. And here we spoke with the organizations, grassroots organizations who have been working in the regions for a long time, as well as funders and who are focusing on UP, for whom UP is a priority state, as to what challenges might be present there that are specific to the state, and how do we work given the socioeconomic context of the region. And of course, here as well, same as with the community dialogue, it came out that people-centric action is very, very important. We need to be empowering local governance and our local institutions. Given the climate vulnerability of UP, it's very, very important to also focus on the water sector. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And before we hand over to our moderator, I just want to introduce today's session and say that it's a very, very interesting one. We are going a little bit more broad and looking at the other co-benefits of land-based mitigation that are present. We're talking about how it can give us a triple dividend in a way of biodiversity from the forest economies, from how cleaner air can be achieved through land-based interventions, and connected landscapes, and what are the role that they play when it comes to climate action. So I'm going to hand over to our moderator today, Dr. Priyanka Bagaria. Priyanka actually has a very, very interesting background herself. She's worked across forestry, biodiversity, climate change, and is now part of our ecosystem services valuation team at IORA. She's very focused on identifying incentive-based mechanisms when it comes to climate action and looking at conservation finance as well. I'm going to hand over to Priyanka.
Thanks, Akriti, for setting that context and also for my introduction. I'll also like to begin by introducing our panel that have joined us today. We have with us Ms. Priyanka Singh, who is program lead with Council on Energy, Environment and Water. Her focus areas include air pollution, solid waste management, circular economy. Ms. Priyanka has provided evidence-based insights, facilitating informed and scientifically grounded policy decisions. She previously worked with CPCB and coordinated the National Clean Air Program in Uttar Pradesh. Ms. Priyanka has previously contributed to waste management frameworks with Sahas Zero Waste and environment impact assessments. We welcome you to the panel, Ms. Priyanka. We have with us Steffan Ajay, who is Associate Coordinator at WWF India, and he leads projects in sustainable livelihoods, circular economy models, and innovative conservation finance. Steffan has designed and implemented large-scale interventions integrating climate resilience, tribal empowerment, and natural resource management across landscapes in India. He's currently pursuing a PhD in social work from TIS and with a focus on Tribals and Forest Rights Act. Welcome, Steffan, to the panel. We have with us Dr. Meghna Bandyopadhyay, who is Assistant Manager at PA Recovery Division of the Wildlife Trust of India, leading conservation efforts in protected areas across central India. During her PhD, she has conducted extensive research on human-wildlife conflict, mesocarnivore ecology, and landscape-level carnivore dynamics. Meghna was also the first Indian recipient of the Louis F. Bacardi Award in 2024 for her outstanding contributions to conservation biology. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Meghna. Akriti has already provided a very good context to the background and context to the panel and the dialogue that we are doing today. The motivation for bringing this diverse field of experts today was that land-based mitigation efforts are primarily designed, though, for carbon sequestration, but however, if designed holistically, we can try to achieve all these other co-benefits, and that is what we would like to have the discussion on. How can we achieve better air, better forest productivity, and better connectivity through a holistically designed LBM? I would start out by asking Dr. Meghna. So, Dr. Meghna, from your doctoral study site in the Great Himalayan National Park, you have noted that fragmented landscapes influence wildlife occupancy and might increase the risk of disease and conflicts in those areas. Now, suppose we were to plan land-based mitigation in these areas. So, how or what are the kind of parameters that we should keep in mind? Maybe it could be the heterogeneity of vegetation or habitat enrichment, such that wildlife movement through these human settlement areas can be without or with minimal hurdles. So over to you, Dr. Meghna.
Thanks, Priyanka, for the insightful, interesting question. So walking in mountains was really a very interesting sight till now for me. So when we talk about national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, and we try to relate the core areas with the buffer. So the buffer are basically is a soft edge, so that there is a balance for human settlements, the forest, and also the biodiversity inhabiting the area. So specifically working in buffer areas, or if you call it as eco-sensitive areas or eco-zone areas, the thing which we might forget, we forget that what are the parameters that we should keep in mind. Because working in eco-sensitive areas, you have forest right acts, you have human needs, you have also biodiversity to look at. So talking about the land-based mitigation strategies, this can be tailored for when you were talking about co-benefits. So definitely there are co-benefits when we talk about land-based mitigation. So in mountains specifically, the problem is with the fallow lands in buffer areas. So these fallow lands, after some time, after some years, it turns into a wasteland. And these wastelands often come up with dump yards. So in my case, when I was studying, a small fallow land in the due course of 7, 8 months and 10 months, it turned up into a wasteland, attracting many mesocarnivores from the core areas to the buffer areas, where there are also human settlements. So then that gave a direction for negative interactions. For example, jackals or red foxes, where they were not used to be before. But now, because of the presence of the resources, they started inhabiting the area. Maybe this was a tradition or this was a coexistence practice even years before, but then the intensity or frequency of this site occupancy, site usage has increased over the last couple of years to a very, very, very great extent. So the fallow lands is a major issue in mountain areas. Secondly, the livestock grazing practices, which is already a traditional practice by the communities, which is fine. But now, when there is a stark difference by the sensitive, eco-sensitive areas and the core areas, so people are more moving into the core areas for grazing practices because that is a natural, traditional practice. They can't get rid of it. They should not. That is their right. But then there should be some regulatory mechanisms that enable them to graze their livestock, and also it should be a sustainable practice. For example, if there is a rotational grazing practice, right? Or if there is a stall feeding practices. So you are not putting pressure in the meadows, which is now also limited in the mountain areas, but then also you are giving them some substitute so that they can graze their livestock and thereby not compromising with their yield and their income associated with that. So fallow lands, livestock grazing, and third is reforestation. So there is rampant tree cutting all over the eco-sensitive areas because of coming up of homestays and expansion of human settlements. So now the tree cover is now going down, and it's majorly sorry for the light cut short. So the cover is now really going down. So what is happening is it is really affecting the generalist species or these habitat specific species. For example, leopard cats, they are very habitat specialist. If the canopy cover is gone, the distribution is hugely disturbed. So these three aspects which I found is where we really need to look at, because this is really high time to look at. And if we don't address the situation now where it is, it might turn into a more conflict areas, which is just a negative interaction areas. It may lead to more conflict in the coming future. And also, this can become a platform for shared resources with human and the wildlife, thereby giving more chances to disease spread. There are already cases for diseases which has been registered, but then it might escalate to a level which might become irreversible in the coming years. So that is what my understanding says about where LBM can help in getting these to not get escalated.
Right, Dr. Meghna. So what I understood is kind of a policy intervention. At the same time, the LBM projects, when designed in these areas, could try to target the fallow lands, which might be potential wastelands or waste dumping yards later on, and the areas could be identified where reforestation might be needed or wherever there's a rampant tree cover removal. What I understood is LBMs should try to target more of these areas and to avoid them becoming from fallow land or areas of high risk human wildlife conflicts. I'll come back to you later, and I'll for now move to Steffan here. So Steffan, you have worked across various landscapes in India, and you've also led community led invasive species removal, participatory forest restoration. From all of your experiences, from an LBM design perspective, how should a land-based mitigation project be designed so holistically, such that it can cater to both community governance structures, ecological assessments? What kind of ecological assessment should go in at the beginning stage of the program, so that it can look at both, bringing the community together and also at the same time managing the problem of invasive management across the landscapes?
Thanks a lot, IORA team, for this opportunity. So I'm going to split this entire answer, and the first of all, the entire approach is community centric and community owned um, work, and this entire invasive species management, it has to be sustainable, and the only option was it has to be done through the communities by themselves. And the approach which we took was the inclusive conservation approach, because we looked at what is needed by the community. And most of the communities who are living in the forests and the current rapid phase of FRA implementation, the initial work for us was getting the rights for the people and making them to govern the entire forest. And that was one of the major breakthrough for our work. And we looked at the governing structures and what was next needed for the community. And community was looking at the livelihood. And livelihood was one of the major problems for all these communities who are living in the core of tiger reserves and looking at different options. And when we looked at NTFPs and all the forest resources, when we looked at mapping and everything, one of the major things which was frequently coming up was lantana infestation, and then the other invasives infestation, which was prevalent. And the elderly was talking about a lot of infestation in the forest, which they could actually see a difference for a very long time, at least for 2 decades, 3 decades. So we looked at that particular idea, and parallelly we also looked at working with the Gram Sabhas, the forest management committees, and one of our groundbreaking pathway which led to this entire work was through a community-based institution called as TAMS. It's called Talavadi Adivasigal Munnetra Sangam. It's a community-based organization which was already there, but when they took up this entire effort of making briquettes out of lantana, it was really possible. And as you were rightly pointing out, it involves a lot of different stakeholders to come together to make a huge impact. And for us, the huge impact was possible just because of Startup Tamil Nadu, because Startup Tamil Nadu is a part of MSME of Tamil Nadu, and they actually funded this entire tribal enterprise to actually scale up this entire lantana briquette project. And when we looked at the economical incentives for this entire activity, we also looked at local ecological restoration and how different categories within the, like, I mean, different subgroups within the communities can be part of the livelihood initiatives. Like, for example, nursery, like various other categories. And how can they also share their knowledge as part of this restoration and everything? So, and in my final point is that when we looked at ecological assessments, we not only looked at from the point of view from the science background, but we more or less looked at it from the traditional knowledge perspective, what they want from their own forests and how they vision their forest to be from the invasive species and things like that. And we also used their own expertise to draft this entire narrative of restoration, community managed invasive species management. And we also linked it accordingly with the forest department and also with the Gram Sabha so that everybody is benefiting out of this entire effort, and each and every stakeholder has their own objective ticked. So I'm very proud that this is a complete tribal-led initiative, right from the starting to the end. And just like other stakeholders, WWF is also just a technical partner to this entire effort.
Stephen, that was so. I guess from your experience, you highlighted a lot about the role of the local institutions and also a lot of policy support in the form of Startup Tamil Nadu in this case. So there has to be some political willingness as well as some economic backing to bring about these, success in these kind of projects. I'll come back to you later about your experience with the tribals, and I also am making a guess that that is what probably motivated you to take up your PhD study on tribals and FRA. So now I'll move to Ms. Priyanka, who's here from the air quality background. Though Ms. Priyanka, these air quality projects may not necessarily be designed to look at land-based mitigation, and they're primarily focused on how the air can be cleaned, PM particulate matter could be removed. But supposingly, if we had to design a project which could also LBM project which could also cater to your improvement of air quality, for example, it could be urban canopy corridors or repairing vegetation. So from your experience, what do you think could be included in the spatial planning of an urban area, especially in case of, for example, Delhi, we do see episodic rise in PM matter, particulate matter in certain months of the year. From your experiences, we'd like to hear.
Thank you, Priyanka. And I think, thank you, IORA, for giving me this opportunity to speak on this platform. And in fact, it's an opportunity to, also break certain myths about, connection of plantation or land-based mitigation or the urban greening with air pollution. So let me try and break it down in terms of air pollution. So when we connect plantation with air pollution, so there are two types of pollution we are talking about. One is the particulate pollution, and the second one is gaseous pollution, right? So while, as we know, that plants have the capacity to, absorb gaseous matter, but when it comes to particulate matter, the only role plants can play, and I would say not plants, actually, your well-grown trees can play, is creating some barriers, which basically either slows down the movement of particulate matter, and then it also gives us. I'm trying to be in a very layman terms. I'm trying to just explain it to you, right? So, and the second thing that it can do is providing some surface for settling down of this particulate matter, which is PM 2.5 and PM 10. So these are the two particulate matter pollution that we are talking about, especially in case of Delhi. Now, I am not completely negating the fact that there is a role that needs to be played by land mitigation activities. And when we talk about the opportunities where we can plan something where the land-based mitigation is also benefiting, in improving the air quality of a particular. Sorry for the background noise. So yeah. So the role that land-based mitigation can play is we know that air pollution currently in India is only central to urban areas, right? We are not even talking about rural areas. But if you look at the data which is available, air pollution does not really follow any boundary, right? So it should be treated equally, whether you are talking about rural or urban areas. So that's where the opportunity for land-based mitigation is, right? Second, in urban areas, as you rightly pointed out, we need to understand what type of species are required for what type of mitigation. So somebody mentioned that the abandoned land has a tendency to be converted into dump sites. The reversal is also true, right? So there are dump sites, if they are not treated and then repurposed again, then that is another site for some sort of pollution, which comes not just in terms of dumping, but also when this waste is burnt, it is also leading to PM 2.5 emissions. Second is we worked on something called hyperlocal mapping of sources. So there are sources that we know, broad categorization of sources like industry, construction, transport, which we see in something called source apportionment study when we are talking about air pollution. But then there are sources which are visible to us, and it's not really quantified in these studies. So there we have the opportunities to mitigate sources like fallow lands, abandoned lands, the plots which are not constructed. So those lands are also source of resuspended dust and resuspended pollution, right? The other opportunity I would say is with construction sites. So there is a norm to have 33% plantation, but most of the times it's not done in a scientific manner. Even the roadside plantation, if we want this to be a co-benefit, air quality improvement to be a co-benefit, we have to be thoughtful of the type of plantation we are doing on all these patches. Then there are schemes which are also covering a lot of this land-based mitigation. I think Miyawaki is buzzword nowadays. So all the urban forestry, because of the land constraint that we see, is we are taking the Miyawaki approach. So we really need to see if there can be a study, and then only we should scale things up, because we have had certain instances that there have been so many, so much investment on a particular topic without even realizing whether we are able to get the desired outcome from that particular intervention or not. So I think there needs to be a study wherein if we are expecting some sort of, improvement in a particular area, then we should do some impact assessment after doing all these land-based mitigation. So if you are expecting air quality improvement, then there should be certain parameters which talk about that, and that can only happen with a proper monitoring. So when you are doing a land-based mitigation in a certain area, so why don't we put some monitoring instrument that can tell us that whether after after restoring this land, then that much pollution has gone down. So I think we need solid evidences to prove this theory. So I think I'll stop here. Moving forward, I think we can continue. Over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you, Ms. Priyanka. First of all, thank you for busting the myth around that air pollution is limited to urban areas. And yes, of course, with air, the pollution also travels to the rural areas. And the previous two speakers, they were talking about the forest buffer areas and connectivity. So I guess the rural landscapes are probably the areas that can be the focus areas for both air quality enhancement or acting as the barriers for particulate matter, as you rightly said. And at the same time, I think there was a conjunction in the panel so far on two things. One is avoiding a land becoming from fallow or a potential dump site, because not just the wildlife conflicts, but also it has a potential to become a source of air pollution. And the two other speakers also commonly talked about the Forest Rights Act, so which is about bringing together the community and knowing what they want and including their needs in the plan. It will be very interesting to see if a land-based mitigation project also in future includes a monitoring instrument to see how it is impacting the air quality apart from the carbon sequestration. I'll come back to Meghna, Dr. Meghna. From your experience in the central India, you've worked a bit on grasslands and worked also with community, how the community is using the land in the central Indian landscapes. So how can a project either be a land-based mitigation or any such restoration, afforestation, reforestation program? What kind of parameters should that include so that functional wildlife corridors can be created and seasonal movement of animals can be allowed? At the same time, I guess also from our previously SLMC project, you have worked a lot with the communities who utilize these buffer areas around the protected areas a lot. So how can we, holistically design a project around the central Indian landscape?
Priyanka, so you rightly said that we did a lot of work around the grasslands through our previous project in SLMC. So what we understood is the first thing is to understand where we have the grasslands, right? Because we don't have natural grasslands as such specifically in central Indian landscape. So the first tough job was to identify the grasslands. So, and to do that, what we figured out is that you have barren lands, right? Which turn into grasslands. I don't know what exactly the term is about, but it depends on what season you are sampling and surveying. So in May, June, it might look as completely barren, but then once you have the first shower, it completely turns into lush green grasslands. So that's the very tricky point, to identify the grasslands. And grasslands for which species? Because grasslands, and when you talk about corridors, it's very tricky to delineate grasslands for corridors and then to restore or do whatever intervention activities is required. Because corridor, it doesn't really fall under a protected area, it passes through a territorial area. And also to understand the corridor as in what, whether it is a dispersal corridor, it is a migratory corridor, we don't know. So when we don't know anything about the landscape, first is to identify the grasslands. Where are the grasslands? What species are using these spaces? And whether it is being used as a dispersal corridor just for movement, or the species is residing in those pocket areas. So our first job was to do that. And it takes a lot of time. So first you have the map, and then we were trying to figure out that where are these spots or these grasslands are falling in, whether it is inside a forest patch or whether it is inside a territorial area. Because once we identify the areas, then the next step is to approach the concerned authorities. So even if you want to do a 3-year management program or intervention program, you have to go to the particular concerned authority. And in due course, what we were trying to understand is that it's highly important to reduce land degradation, because when we go to the territorial areas, there are a lot of lands which are in a degraded condition. So the first thing is to restore land, I mean, not restore, reduce land degradation. I think that is where can LMB pitch into this idea, reduce land degradation, and introduce the concept of urban and peri-urban agriculture. This is not very talked about, but then when it comes to corridors, it passes through a heterogeneous landscape, and where you have forested patches, you have agriculture, you have human settlement also, because animals, they don't know the passage, they don't know where they have to navigate through. We have to create a space so that it is easy for there to disperse or to move. So these two LMB strategies that we were talking about during our project phase, that if this can be focused, that reduce land degradation, and by saying reduce degradation means first to protect the identified patches, whether in due course of 3 years, because it takes minimum of 3 years if we plan to protect or revive a grassland. It takes 3 years, first weeding and then again weeding. So 3 years of weeding makes a grassland again reusable for the species. Secondly, to look at the heterogeneity, whether an urban peri-urban concept can be launched, because it's very new concept, and if it is adopted, I think it will be really helpful for people to understand, and the local communities, because we understand, and it's not really easy to make it convincible to the people. And in this context, so there are already communities like, so when we talk about joint forest management, JFMCs, so it has 3 divisions: the Eco Development Committee, the Van Suraksha Samiti, and the Gram Vikas Samiti. So the EDCs, they particularly work along the wildlife sanctuaries and national parks. The Van Suraksha Samiti and the Gram Vikas Samiti, these are the two committees that has been shaped particularly to work in these territorial areas. So if there is a forest block, if it is, whether it is degraded or it is semi-degraded, the Van Suraksha Samiti and the Gram Van Samiti are the committees that should work in these territorial areas. So that is our concept, that what we find out, that if we want to work in the grasslands that need to be restored, we will reach out to these concerned committees. So because these are again local people. So in a way, we are uh, looping in the local people through these JFMC already created groups to work in these grasslands to restore, work for 3 years, and then make it sustainable so that it can be run through these communities, even if there are no NGOs in the landscape. So that was our concept, and that is what we were trying to do through SLMC.
Right, Meghna. One very interesting point that you mentioned is, which also has overlap with the previous speaker, is just like air pollution does not know its barriers, animals also do not know its barriers, and hence it's very important to include urban and peri-urban areas, or agriculture, at least the agricultural landscapes in peri-urban regions, into these LBM plannings. And again, we'll maybe probably circle back at the end of the panel about how, because you mentioned a lot of institutions, and Steffan has also mentioned a lot of institutional role in the success of restoration projects, which are also, we are terming them as LBM projects. I'll move to Steffan. So Steffan, across all your restoration projects, you have also seen in enhancement of the tribal livelihood through improved forest productivity. So again, from an LBM perspective, should there be special focus given to the choice of trees, or a specific NTFPs, or it should be more towards the native plantation and not necessarily the choice of NTFP trees? Because you also mentioned a lot about how in your programs, one of the foremost criteria for you was to look at what the community is wanting from that restoration program. So I mean, what was something else that you were looking at for the improved economic status of the improved income for the tribals, or it was intangible, unplanned, but it just came out as a co-benefit?
Thank you, Priyanka. So, what I think is, see, there are multiple benefits to whatever the conservation activity which we are doing, and in most of the times, it is not only on the economical benefit per se, but it also means a cultural benefit also, because most of the tribal have a very good cultural connect to the area which is around, and definitely economical benefit is very much necessary. And when we looked at designing this entire project, when we look at this invasive management across the country, we look at various options. For example, when we worked on lantana, or for example pine, we looked at various options, like for example briquette or pellets, or even cellulose or even leather for an extent. We are looking at different options and the marketability to it, and which is also doable for the community. And so when it comes to the economic benefit, it has to also very easily be adaptable for the community. Otherwise, we bringing an idea and forcing them, it won't work. So they have to actually lead this entire effort. And yes, definitely there are a lot of other benefits to it. Example, the conservation benefits, and people have a lot of connect with the forest when it relating to the NTFPs, especially when we looked at spinach varieties. There were around 130 spinach varieties which was used by the people, but now they are very rare. Like for example, 15 or 20 NTFP, especially the spinach varieties. So they actually wanted to revive those things. So it is for them a kind of revival to their traditional knowledge, as well as the economical benefit to this entire effort. And like Meghna was saying, all this restoration is a long-term activity. It is not a one-time go. So at least 3 years. That's what she was also saying, and we also feel that it's a long-term activity. And how do you ensure sustainability to this entire effort? And one of the major thing which I'm keeping on repeating is building a strong financial structure to it, and a incentive sharing mechanism, and maybe a long-term benefit which looks at voluntary markets also. Because when there is a when there is a benefit sharing mechanism, it is very nice to work on a land-based mitigation measure when it comes to this entire activity. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I think you mentioned a lot about how, to bring in the financial incentives and the marketability of the, forest-based produce. And this reminds me of one of the previous LBM dialogues which we had done around the role of community. And again, all the panelists unanimously in their, versions, they said that how it is important to onboard the community. The only key to that is by bringing in economic incentives. Now that we're talking about the finances and economics, I want to bring in Ms. Priyanka. And Ms. Priyanka, in one of your reports, you have informed us that many of these non-attainment cities, they utilize almost less than 30% of the allocated NCAP funding given to them. I mean, how can these local governments be encouraged to invest more on, urban clean air funds, maybe through, these urban greening or restoration measures, or agroforestry in the peri-urban areas? Emma, what is the key to motivate them to utilize these funds in a better way?
Right. Thank you, Priyanka. Just a little correction. I mean, while the report that you're talking about, we did that some time back. The number has revised, and it's close to 70% now. But even for the last 5 years, if the utilization has remained 70%, that means there's a window of improvement there. But coming to why, I think it's interesting to see where that 70% utilization has happened, and why there is a little less focus on activities which make your at least city look aesthetically better, right? So the thing is, when we talk about urban forestry or any of such interventions, because the only land-based mitigation interventions that I can think of under National Clean Air Program is the plantation which is done in the urban areas, right? Whether it is by forestry department, or it is by municipal corporation, or it is by your irrigation department, because that is talked about less, but that is one of the departments which is given this task. Now, what happens is when we look at forestry, it's as Stefan mentioned, it's at least a 3-year program, right? So if you plan because there is survival rate that you have to monitor after plantation, so it takes some time to show some improvement. So the fund which was allocated in year one, to utilize that fund and give utilization, so that takes a 4-year route. That is why most of the cities have, and then, okay, coming back. and then the next year allocation happens if you have utilized certain money. So that is why there is less focus on on activities which are a little longer term, because the cycle is 1 year for financing, while these activities are 4 year. I have 4 year cycle, so there is a cycle mismatch when we are talking about such activities. Now, the money that is going for activities, most of the money, I mean, 67% of the money has gone for road dust management, because as people perceive that, the perception is not just with the normal citizen, but even how governments are seeing it. They are mainly focused on PM10 reduction, which is mostly you see it in the form of haze dust, right? So and one of the you say lowest hanging fruit in terms of giving in money is the road dust management. So it's being invested in mechanical sweepers just to mitigate dust from road, right? So that's there. But I think I also need to bring one more point about the land-based mitigation when we are talking about non-attainment cities. There are things which need to be considered when we are planning. So if you see in a city like Delhi, you'll see there is a spike in fires, the open waste fires. Why that happen is because other than we keep talking about crop residue burning, but what we don't talk about, and it will be coming in some future conversations, maybe starting this year, is some of the burning that is happening because of the waste which is generated from natural sources. So when I say that, so when there is a fall season, there is so much of tree falling. If there is some strong wind happening, I mean there is tree which are falling. But because of this bulk, this has nowhere to go. Either it ends up in landfill, which is again logistically not sensible for any urban local body. So what is happening is this matter is being collected somewhere, and then it's generally burnt either by the citizens for getting warmth in a city like Delhi during winters, or by the waste workers themselves because they want to save on the logistic cost. So that happens intentionally as well as unintentionally. So both of these. So this is also leading to air pollution rather than addressing air pollution. So I'm not saying that it is happening rampantly, but the data states. I think in Delhi there were some. If I remember the number correctly, it was almost 4,000 incidents which were related. So these are the reported incidents I'm talking about. So when we are planning such interventions, we also need to plan what happens on the site, right? So just like your peri-urban and corridors that need to be considered, we need to also consider that when we are planning for urban green cover, we also plan for what comes with that, right? We have to have plan for the horticulture waste that comes with that, the green waste that comes with that, so that it is not adding on to the pollution during a particular season that is anyway talked about. And then there are multiple sources that we are talking about and missing out on the local sources. So I think that is something that I want to talk about. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Priyanka. So again, first of all, thank you for bringing to our knowledge that even the irrigation department is tasked with a lot of urban greening programs, and they are also responsible for it apart from the forestry and the municipalities. So again, drawing or connecting the lines between all of the panel speakers so far, the timeline that any such project requires is at least 3 to 4 years, and that should be taken into consideration also while planning a good or a holistic LBM project. Again, very interesting to note that how even urban green spaces should be designed very mindfully so as not to become areas or sources of further pollution. Ms. Priyanka, just another very quick question with you is, we all see, especially in Delhi, we see how the graded response action program comes into action in the month, especially in the winter months. In this GRAP, does the policy also include include any sort of green guidelines for how to design green schemes, or it's just about these physical actions that we see as citizens on the ground?
Right. So, like I said, there is this longevity of a program, right? So it's we are not talking about some overnight interventions which just reduces air pollution. I'm restricting myself to air pollution only, right? And if you see, GRAP is basically so how it was, started, and then how it has evolved. So now it is looking at 2 day data, right? So for that, I think if we want to have certain long-term intervention, that needs to come with the master plan, or maybe the whenever there is urban planning happening. But that also needs to consider, I think, which is not considered mostly, treat all these local sources as projects, right? And then consider when you are planning plantation, and if you have an aim to arrest air pollution uh, in by whatever contribution, I think there are certain parameters that we need to consider when we are doing this plantation. One of which can be predominant wind and wind velocity, right? So when we talk about air pollution, like say for example, a city like Delhi, if they are planning to have some barrier created through plantation, I think the plantation, if it is done in the upwind direction, or maybe it's a vague theory, but this is what I can maximally think of when we are talking about land-based mitigation. Also, I think since I talked about the fallow lands, I think we need to be very careful, and we need to, prioritize lands which need mitigation, right? Say, for example, when there is an open dump site or any hotspot where this is happening, maybe rather than picking a fresh area, choose that and restore that properly with an aim to, create a barrier for particulate pollution, not just like, covering it with grass, something like that. So maybe being mindful of, the trees which are selected for this reclamation. So that's, but for an intervention like GRAP, I don't think we can have any reactive measure that can come from, land-based mitigation. It has to be proactive. And when I say proactive, it has to be very well planned for at least with a time period of say 5 to 10 years. I'll stop there.
Thank you. I'll just maybe among the panel, if there are any last comments, if the panel members would want to make on the go, or within the panel, if you would want to ask a very quick question with each other, we can take a quick moment for that. Or Akriti, would you like to come in and make a quick comment, or should we go for conclusion? Okay, thank you, panel, all of you, Ms. Priyanka, Steffan, and Dr. Meghna, for joining us for this very interesting, a dialogue today, where we came in from very distinct backgrounds, and we tried to find out how an LBM can be better enriched and better planned to reach, make maximal benefits. So one of the key cross-cutting pointers that all of you made was looking at it as a long-term plan, maybe 3 to 4 years at the minimum, include monitoring in the plan, not to forget the rural-urban connect, just as air pollution moves across and wildlife moves across, and very interestingly, restore the fallow land. It may also act as a barrier to air pollution, and at the same time become a roadway or the corridor for the wildlife. So again, it's a double dividend that we can get from there. Steffan, you talked a lot about community and how local institutions and the policy interventions can help in improving these programs. And we'll maybe close with the thought that probably arresting degradation is the roadway to all of these different successes of all these programs that we all work on. On behalf of IORA, I thank the panelists, and we look forward to connect again sometime in future. Also thanking the audience who have joined us live on LinkedIn. Thank you for hearing us in, and we'll see you again next month. Thank you. Thank you, panel.